got a couple injuries now at a position that the Eagles are already light. We've got some interesting things happening ahead of Thursday night's game, which you can hear live right here on 97.3 ESPN. You're home for the Eagles. They'll play the Titans on Thursday night. And who will be under center? Will it be Carson Wentz? Mike Groh today, John, said they're still in the process of figuring that out. But do we have an answer in your mind on that?
Well, if he is going to play, sit down and get situated quickly, because it's not going to be long either way. So it's kind of one of those things where, hey, maybe you want to send a statement that say Carson's back and healthy and have him out there for a series, but any extended playing time, not a chance. I mean, there's just no use for it. We talk about it all the time with the preseason, and it's not just Carson Wentz. All the key players on this team. If some have to play because of numbers, but be very, very quick cameos.
Yeah, and I mean, that's the new, the way the league is trending is that the first preseason game, it used to be like you got a couple series. The second one, you got about a quarter. The third one was like a dress rehearsal, and then the fourth one went out the window. It's kind of changing the way the whole thing goes. I mean, barely you see anybody in game one, a little bit in two. Even that third game anymore is not like it used to be.
No, it isn't. And Jim Schwartz gave us a great story yesterday, going way back to 1978. This is how much the NFL has changed over the years. Burt Jones was the quarterback of the Colts, and he was a great player at the time. And they played 6 preseason games back then. So that's number one. Can you imagine 6 preseason games? And then Jones, who was one of the best players in the league, gets hurt because they're trying to win the final preseason game. And they took him out and put him back in to win the game. That's how drastically the NFL has changed over the years.
Yeah, there's no question that the whole concept of the way the preseason, which means you don't find out a lot. So you probably found out more last night than you'll find out in this game on Thursday. So let's go back to last night a little bit and kind of give the listeners a little bit of what went into that open practice. Did you get a chance to see anything that kind of stood out? And then, of course, there was a couple of injuries over the weekend that we need to dive into.
Yeah, Joe Osman got carted off, and really, that was the second player carted off in 2 days. Camus Brugier-Hill was obviously carted off the day before. Grade 3 MCL strain for Camus. So he'll be back at some point. He's going to miss some games at the start of the regular season, but it could have been much worse. The Eagles haven't updated Osman. They're still evaluating, but I can tell you it certainly didn't look good, because you can tell as he was put on the cart, a number of his teammates came over to console him, and it's one of those things where those ACL tests on the field are pretty concrete, and it's certainly got that feeling that it's going to be a significant injury.
So besides Osman, Shelton Gibson limped off the field Sunday. Is that anything to look into there?
Well, yeah. He didn't practice today, but I did see Shelton in the locker room. So if it were really serious, he certainly would have been in the trainer's room or something of that nature. So I don't think from his perspective it's going to be really devastating. That's not to say it can't be a high ankle sprain or something like that, which is a multi-week injury, but it certainly doesn't – it's not shaping up to be season-ending or anything like that.
What about the linebacker group, John? Because that's been a position that a lot of people are questioning and talking about some names that maybe listeners out there aren't too familiar with. So
plus one got hurt.
Plus one goes down as well. So just give us the update on the linebackers, what you saw yesterday.
Well, I mean, that position is getting devalued. And just the way NFL teams play on offense, you're generally down to 2 that are on the field most of the time. And I think now you might even see a lot of dime, certainly a lot of big nickel with the Eagles playing 3 safeties. So That position as a whole has been devalued. Right now, the starters are Nate Gary and Zach Brown. At some point, you expect Nigel Bradham to be ready to go. He'll be the one linebacker that's always on the field. And then I think Jonathan Cyprian's here for a reason. And this team is looking to get deep at the safety position because they plan on playing a lot of safeties. And it starts with Malcolm Jenkins and Rodney McLeod and Andrew Sendejo and now Cyprian. So I think you're going to see a shift to where you're going to see a ton of safeties on the field. And part of it is just a reality of how the NFL has changed. And you need guys that can cover more than you need guys that can stop the run.
So going to that defensive back, that secondary unit, what did you see yesterday, and just what have you seen lately? Has anything changed? I saw that Sidney Jones was back in the slot today. You wrote about that on 97.3 ESPN.com. Avonte Maddox working on the outside. What's going on with the secondary?
Well, those two guys have been rotating daily as far as one starting on the outside, the other in the slot, and then vice versa. And Jim continues to do that to see what the best fit is. Rodney McLeod at safety is finally back in team drills, so you have Malcolm and Rodney as the starting safeties. And the big nickel today would be Andrew Sendejo with those two safeties. So it's starting to shape up, but you still need guys back. Ronald Darby, we've had so many new injuries, we don't talk about the old injury. Ronald Darby's still not healthy, still not available for team drills. Jalen Mills is still on the PUP list. So it's still early, and Jim Schwartz said that yesterday. Someone asked him, at what point do you become concerned? And he said, not now. And it's just, again, that new sentiment in the NFL where it's about getting guys to week one as healthy as possible. And as long as they're ready with maybe 2 weeks to go before week one, I think the Eagles will be fine with that.
Yeah, Deshaun Jackson, I want to get to him because he seemed to be a big story last night. Got the biggest ovation from what I saw and heard and following you guys on Twitter. It seemed like the fans were excited to see him back, but I guess Carson Wentz is excited to have a guy like him.
Yeah, I think everybody is. I think the other receivers are because they see, even though they haven't gotten to other opponents, and we'll see that Thursday, and then in a couple weeks, the Baltimore Ravens will be here for joint practices in advance of a preseason game. But they can see just from working against their own defense what having somebody who can pop the top on the defense with his speed does for the underneath stuff. And this team has a lot of really, really good intermediate receivers, whether they're outside like Alshon Jeffrey, in the slot like Nelson Aguilar, or tight ends like Zach Ertz and Dallas Goedert. Offensively, this team, and we've talked about it for a while now, on paper, not only looks really good, really talented, but everything fits together perfectly. And that's the first time I can say the latter part of that really in the Doug Peterson era. So even though there's a lot of questions on the defense, some related to injuries that we mentioned, this team's going to score a lot of points. So if they can just put up a serviceable defense, think about 16, maybe middle of the road in the league, they're going to be really good.
Yeah, and, one guy, too, on the offensive side of the ball. The running back spot's interesting because obviously Sanders being a rookie, Penn State, second round, there's a lot of excitement for him. You got Sproles back here. You brought in Jordan Howard. Well, you had tweeted about Josh Adams. He seems like a forgotten man. Everybody's been wanting to write off Wendell Smallwood for the last couple of seasons. So how did that position kind of materialize last night? And maybe even into Thursday where that might be one position where these guys are going to get some touches.
Yeah, they are, and I think it's more important for a position like running back because it is difficult to look at runners, let's be honest, without live periods in the pad zone. The Eagles have had a few live periods, and that's where a guy like Josh Adams has stood out because he is so big, he is so physical, and that's especially with the younger backs. That's somewhere where the preseason can be important because you are tackling, and it is live, and you can see what they do with pads on. I mean, you could talk about explosion, and even somebody like Corey Clement, who's now back, looked very explosive today, but nobody's tackling him. Nobody's trying to bring him down. They're studs, and today there wasn't even that. It was a 10-10-10 practice, but it's really difficult to judge running backs until the pads are on, until people are tackling. And especially, as I said, you know what Jordan Howard can do. The Eagles can look at the tape of Chicago. You know he's a physical guy who can move the chains. But as far as the younger backs, you need to see them in that live environment. And obviously it starts with Miles Sanders. Everybody's really excited. I saw one guy compare him to LaShawn McCoy. I said, can we pump the brakes a little bit? That might be the best running back in Eagles history. So maybe he should play a real game before we make that comparison. But and that's what you do with young backs. I mean, even more so, it's about pass protection. Can you pick up the blitz? Can you protect the quarterback? And so all of that is important with preseason.
Yeah, and it's a question that you asked today, too, about how important the live environment is of the preseason game for the younger players. And last night's kind of like a mini version of that. You're out practicing in front of 40,000 people. But as we kind of chronicled, it's hard to balance it where you don't want these guys to get hurt, so you don't know how many reps they're going to get. But it seems that it is different and more valuable to the coaching staff to see them in those reps.
Yeah, and that's where it comes in. I mean, it's evaluation. Nobody's trying to win a game. Nobody's trying to game plan. Nobody's doing any of that. But they do want to evaluate the young players because they know what the veteran players can do. They've seen it time and time again. So somebody like Fletcher Cox, who's working his way back from off-season surgery, or Nigel Bradham, or so many of these players, even Rodney McLeod, you don't need to see it. But with young players who've never done it before, you do need to see it, and that's where you can evaluate things.
John, you've been around this team for a long time. Is there any new leaders that are emerging this summer? Because we have the Alshon Jeffries of the world. Darren Sproles is back. Obviously, the quarterback, Carson Wentz, he's always going to be a leader. But you have guys like Jordan Howard. You have guys like Djax returning. How's the morale and the leadership roles taking place here early on in camp?
Well, I think the big microscope is on Carson Wentz because of some of the issues last season. Obviously, the Philly boys story that got a lot of traction about some people questioning him. But I think that had more to do with the fact that he was injured. And this is before the stress fracture of the back, when you go back to when he tore his ACL, and you're kind of rehabbing and off by yourself. So injured players talk about all the time. You're part of the team, but you're kind of not part of the team because you're off to the side rehabbing. So I think a lot of it was just that. And now that Carson is back and obviously the face of the franchise, I think most of that takes care of itself. As far as other players, new players, I mean, understand this is a very, very strong locker room. And when you walk into a locker room with Malcolm Jenkins and Jason Peters and Jason Kelsey and Lane Johnson and Zach Ertz, there's not a lot of room for new people to step up and sort of be leaders, and they're not needed to be honest.
Yeah, and one thing, I want to go back to the linebackers, Camus, who, of course, has that grade 3, which is going to keep him out, about 6 to 8 weeks. And you kind of touched on that position is kind of devalued, but was he the guy that they were anticipating getting most of the snaps in that spot?
Well, again, Nigel Bradham would be the linebacker that would be always on the field. So even if you go into a dime package, he would be the one linebacker projected to be on the field. But Camus would be that second linebacker. And if you think about it, when Jordan Hicks was here, it was always Hicks would be number one, Bradham would be number two, and then Bradham would step up when Jordan was hurt, which was all too often, and that's the reason he's not here, to be honest. So Camus would be sort of settling into Nigel's old position, and Nigel got bumped up. And that's how it was shaping out. And really, if you were talking about Jimmy Kempski did his media poll, as he does every year, on who's trending up and who's trending down, everybody would have said Camus Grugier Hill, and I still did, because he only got hurt on Saturday, and he's been the best player. He's been the guy who's had a tremendous camp. Everybody knows it. Everybody knows how good he's been. He intercepted Carson Wentz twice. He's been tremendous. So even Jim Schwartz said it. It's a bit of a setback for him. It's a bit of a setback for us, because he looked like a guy who was taking a big step forward in his career. The good news is he'll be back relatively early in the season. You're probably talking 2 to 4 weeks, and if you're going to be cautious, more like the latter. But, yeah, it hurts.
Yeah, and then I guess the one thing for Thursday night, I guess, to keep an eye on, of course, we'll talk more about that game getting closer. But as you wrote about today, Sidney Jones back in the slot, Maddox to the outside. It seems that they're just going to keep giving those guys reps inside and outside. And then I would assume you'll see them kind of battle it out in the preseason games. That might be a position where the guys might actually have to be on the field to try to win those jobs.
Well, I mean, they're both going to play a lot, unless the wild card really is Jalen Mills, and it doesn't look like he's going to be ready anytime soon. So it wouldn't surprise me if he starts the season on the PUP list. So it's just a matter of who's going to be the three-down player and who's going to play the slot. But both of them project to play a lot. So that's where I think even players, they're young players, somewhat proven, expected to play, but still young and relatively inexperienced. But even in their case, I think when Baltimore is here and they have the joint practices, I think for those guys that will be more important than the preseason games, because I think even with players of that ilk, the Eagles will try to be very, very cautious, because they know they need them both. And the last thing they want to do is get them hurt.
All right, John McMullen at JF McMullen is the NFL preseason. All the teams in action. The Eagles begin Thursday night. You can hear the game live on 97.3 ESPN. We had the Hall of Fame weekend. Great ceremonies. Of course, it seemed like Ed Reed was the star of the show. He seemed to steal everything. But do you have any insight onto why he gave a thank you to Bill Belichick and his staff?
I do not. I was so immersed in the Eagles stuff, I didn't really get to see a lot of the Hall of Fame stuff. The biggest disappointment to me was Don Banks, the longtime NFL writer, passed away out there while covering it. That was a really, really sad story. But, you know, I've been out to about 3 or 4 of those things, and unfortunately, when you cover a team up close, you don't get as much time to see all the stuff and see the transcripts and all that. So I really, to be honest, didn't get a chance to see much of anybody's speech. But
he basically he said, you know, I want to thank. I guess he thanked. Yeah. Okay. We have the audio of it here. It was really bizarre because he kind of hit on a lot of guys, but before he thanked Harbaugh, he thanked Bill Belichick and his staff, and we're all kind of wondering, like, did he ever?
Was that sarcasm?
Was there a situation where he played, you know, in the Pro Bowl or something for Belichick, and that none of us realized or missed? I don't know, but that was kind of something that everybody was kind of talking about, because he stole the show this weekend, and he was great.
He was.
And I saw his and Gonzalez, and I think who else did I? Oh, Mawai. I saw Kevin Mawai's speech. They were the 3 that I kind of got to see. I have the other ones DVR'd, but All right, football is back. We saw that game Thursday, which, by the way, the ratings were down for. It was like a 6 something last year. This year was like a 4. So people were not all that enthralled by the Hall of Fame game. But we'll see. Eagles and Titans Thursday night, how that does. I'm sure the thirst for the Eagles will certainly be there. And John McMullen will be there for 97.3 ESPN.com. John, we'll talk again tomorrow, pal.
All right. Thank you, guys. Appreciate it.